All right, welcome back to part two. Just kind of tailing off on what I was just talking about. Question four had to do with give three reasons why Edmund agrees to help her. And I already gave away one of those answers. I think he wants to try to get revenge or put one over on his siblings. He can be the big shot, and not Peter. Um, Obviously, I mean, she's kind of first. I mentioned, why does somebody give in to somebody who's apparently evil? But I mean, she puts the charm on in the beginning, which I guess is another theme of the story. And again, a deeper fantasy. You kind of see deeper themes. You know, the devil or the evil character doesn't usually appear so evil or so devilish in the beginning. They find a way to hook us in to their plans, and they have a variety of means to do that. Bribery. She gives him that Turkish delight, which, by the way, it must be some hell of a Turkish delight, man. There must be something in there. Give me some of that. But he loves that. He can't get enough of it. So she tempts him with that. She promises him, you know, he'll be king. He'll have great prominence, and also that kind of element that plus you can kind of stick it to your siblings. So he agrees to go along with her. Um, why is she so concerned about these kids showing up? Well, of course, there's the prophecy, another deeper theme to the story as well. Two sons of Adam and two daughters of Eve show up in Narnia. Uh, that would lead to the end of her reign. So she takes that very seriously. So she has to do away with uh, that threat. Um, by the way, how clever of Lewis was it to make uh, Narnia this place where it's winter all the time with no Christmas. I mean, holy crap! I mean, that be well. It's almost as bad as it's almost as bad as what we're living through right now. Um, so she finds a way to convince him to do these things, um, and she's doing it because she wants to get rid of the kids, because again of the prophecy. So you guys talked about that. Number five, again, this hints at or talks about another aspect that Lewis uses to make his fantasy more believable. Have a respected figure in the story, give credence to the idea that it's possible. Um, and then the professor is that character in the story. He doesn't poo poo what Lucy's saying at all, um, even gives further evidence that it might actually be something that's real. So, again, ground the story in a realistic setting, have a doubter who eventually uh, realizes that it's true, have a respected mentor figure type who lends credence to it, and those are three of the techniques right there. And I think we're kind of talking about question 17 right now, but it ties in with what we've been talking about so far. As far as the IDs go, I'm not going to go over those. Most of you, I think, ID'd them correctly. Um, you might see something like that on the final exam, so just a word to the wise, as my fifth grade teacher used to say. So know your IDs. Mr. Tumnus obviously is a very important character to helping them. Um, Aslan, of course, and this again hints at other aspects of the story that make it more of a higher fantasy. I find it very interesting, and if you read the articles, and hopefully you did in the packet, you know that when Lewis was asked about this, is Aslan, representative of Christ? Is this story a Christian allegory? He kind of hedged his bets a little bit, as far as I'm concerned, and he called it a supposal instead, and kind of left us to figure out, what the heck he meant by that. So obviously there are elements of the Christ story in this series. Um, Aslan being a representative of Christ. So many things that happen along the story kind of mirror the Christ story, including his sacrifice. Um, he sacrifices himself uh, to the White Witch to spare Edmund. And of course, then his resurrection afterwards on the stone table. Uh, all of these are echoes of the Christ story. Um, and one of the questions I usually like to ask, and this kind of hints at number 18, what potential issues are there for teaching this book? Usually in class, I ask, how many of you read this book in school? And usually a number of people say they did. Um, and my second question is usually, well, if you read it in school, did the teacher in any way discuss this or touch on the fact that this might be a Christian allegory or supposal or whatever you want to call it? And most students say no, for understandable reasons. Uh, I think a teacher in today's world might have it, unless maybe teaching at a private Christian school. I think that's a different issue. But in a public school setting, they probably don't get into this. But you can't ignore it. It's there. Lewis wanted you to see it, and wanted to bring these messages and lessons and themes uh, from biblical stories, including and most prominently Jesus Christ, to this story. So, I mean, we have to talk about it. We have to address it. I think it works as a fantasy story, even if you don't talk about those things, which is probably how most teachers handle it. But it's something that's there, and we need to address it. Um, so, Aslan is this magical figure who they just hear about at first. And of course, three of the children kind of have this. They have this strange excitement. They feel wonderful, but they're not sure why they do. And a little bit of foreshadowing. Edmund's the one kid that's kind of iffy about it. And of course, he eventually leaves to join the White Witch. And Father Christmas does make an appearance. And as you guys said, Peter's given the shield and the sword, Susan a bow with arrows and a horn. Edmund wasn't there to get it. And Lucy gets a container of a healing potion, which she eventually uses, a little bit of foreshadowing, she eventually uses to save Edmund's life. And one of my favorite moments in the whole story is when Aslan looks at her and says, okay, you've saved your brother. There are other people who could benefit from that potion, being very Aslan-like. And of course, she does that. She's also given a dagger. I don't know what the hell little Lucy would have done with a dagger. I don't know. But anyway, and most of those are used in one way or another. It's kind of like the Hunger Games. If you give characters things in the beginning of the story, chances are they're going to use them by the end of the story. So we see that in this story. Aslan outwits the witch because he knew of the deeper magic. This to me has always been, we talk about inconsistencies in the fantasy world, and students have disagreed with me in the past, and that's okay. I don't know. This is the one part of the story, and I guess it has connections to Christian stories. I'm not a Bible scholar, I'll admit it, so I'm not sure. But the idea that she thought she had him because of the deep magic, but then there's a deeper magic that saves him, and it just seemed like a convenient plot idea. And I'm just wondering, is there a deeper magic after the deepest magic? I'm being facetious here, but that was the one aspect. But she does outwit him because he knows much more than she does, and she thinks she has one over on him, but she doesn't. We talked about redemption, and Edmund does redeem himself at the end. Like I said, he breaks her wand and is hurt, well, mortally, it sounded like to me. I mean, there's some violence in this story, too. In fact, have you ever seen the recent, well, I shouldn't say recent, I guess it's been like 10 years ago now, where they filmed this. The battle sequence is really kind of disturbing. It's not for little kids, real little kids. But we see Edmund redeem himself, as I said, and good triumphs. One of the questions, another one of my favorite parts, and when I'm in class, I usually take some time to read some of the passages that are so wonderful. I'm not going to do that here. But one of my favorite passages has to do with question 12. What is perhaps the most wonderful thing that happened? There's a marvelous passage when Aslan is resurrected, and of course the two girls witness this, and then he has to go to the battle to save them, and he has them grab on top of his back, and it's just beautiful the way it's written. There's so many wonderful passages. And again, similar to Charlotte's Web, although with a very different style and language, which is much more advanced. Lewis is very, very good in describing passages in such a way that, I mean, you know what you're reading is a fantasy, but yet, boy, it just really seems real, and it's so effective and so wonderful. 15, what are examples showing a Christian allegory or supposal? I guess we've covered that. What are hints will be a sequel? Well, it's referred to. Plus, you know, they bring up they bring up the white stag, just kind of as an end, and then you kind of wonder, well, why would that even be mentioned unless something's going to come of that? So there are a few clues that you guys pointed out that we're not done with stories about Narnia. I think that's about everything. I just wonder, something I might ask you on the final is, do you see any inconsistencies in the fantasy world he created? And I think there may be a few. The whole time travel thing where, you know, they grow up to be, you know, young adults by the end of the story in Narnia, and then they come back and then they're kids again. You know, I've never been, I'll be honest with you, we might as well be honest. There's nothing you can do to me. You're 1,000 miles away. So there, haha. Time travel has never been one of my favorite genres, and it's for reasons like this. This is the kind of thing where I go, well, yeah, but they were old when they were older kids. They were young adults when they were in Narnia, and now they go back home and then they're kids. I mean, how does that happen? How does that work? And those of you who love fantasy and science fiction are probably shaking your head and saying, you know, screw you, Shank. But that would be an inconsistency. There may be others as well. But by and large, it's a wonderful classic example. The whole series, obviously, is wonderful. I just ask you to read this book. There's actually a prequel as well. Great example of what we would call high fantasy. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this was beneficial. Like I said, you all did very, very well on the answers to these. I'm trying to look to see if there's anything I might have left out. I don't think so. I think that's all I wanted to cover. All right, so there you go. Like I said, somewhere toward the end of the week, look in Blackboard about what's going to be due the week after break. And during that time, I hope you stay safe and well, and try to deal with this as best you can. I've read a lot of different things. Some of them are pretty scary about what's coming next. Others are not so scary, and it's kind of hard to know what to believe. But I think we all know the basics here. You know, try to isolate yourself as much as possible. Well, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I mean, I'm no expert. You know what to do. But just stay well. And again, if there's anything you need from me, any questions you want answered, feel free to contact me. Email, Facebook, 330-958-6320 if you want to send me a text message. Excuse me. Sorry, no Charlie today. Maybe next time. All right, take care. Be well. Try to have a good break. This will probably be the last video I give you before break. Like I said, I'll be trying different electronic ways of communicating over the next week or so, and maybe we'll have a different venue starting the week we come back. All right, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.